My mother, Eleanor, only had two modes, ice cold or hellfire, and with me and my son Leo, she only used the latter. I had learned to live with it, or so I told myself every morning when I woke up in that suffocating attic apartment. The ceiling sloped so low on one side that Leo had hit his head twice already this month. The single window faced west, turning the room into an oven every afternoon from May through September. Meanwhile, 20 feet below us, the main house sprawled in air-conditioned comfort, rooms that had once been mine now converted into Brooke's personal closet for the clothes she didn't wear anymore. 2 shifts at the corner booth diner kept food on the table and a roof over our heads, even if that roof leaked when it rained hard. The morning shift started at 5:30, which meant leaving Leo asleep and hoping he wouldn't wake before my mother checked on him at 7. The evening shift ended at 11, which meant coming home to find him already in bed, homework sometimes done, sometimes not, depending on whether Eleanor had felt charitable enough to remind him. Brooke lived in a sprawling 4-bedroom colonial across town in the new development, the one with the golf course and the community pool. Mom and Dad had put down the down payment as a wedding gift. They covered her car payment when her husband Mark's business hit a rough patch. They paid for her gym membership, her spa days, her bi-weekly hair appointments at that expensive salon in Portland. When she mentioned wanting to redecorate her living room, Dad handed her his credit card without blinking. I had asked once, 3 years ago, if they could help with Leo's preschool tuition. Just $200 a month so he could attend the program at the church. Mom had looked at me like I had asked her to donate a kidney. "We already give you free housing, Clara. How much more do you expect us to sacrifice for your mistakes?" My mistake. That was what Leo was to them. A mistake born from a relationship with a man who left when the pregnancy test came back positive, a man whose last name I barely remembered now. Jake or Jason or James. It didn't matter. He was gone. And I was left with a beautiful baby boy and a family that saw us both as a shameful stain on their pristine reputation. Every breath Leo and I took in that cramped space was treated as an insult to their legacy, a stain on the family name they had built in Maple Creek over 3 decades. Richard and Eleanor Hartwell, pillars of the community. He served on the town council. She chaired the historical society and organized the annual charity gala. They had the perfect family, the perfect house, the perfect life. Except for me. Except for their eldest daughter who had gotten pregnant at 22 and never quite recovered her footing. But I endured. I always endured. That was what daughters like me did, wasn't it? The ones who weren't quite pretty enough, weren't quite successful enough, weren't quite anything enough. Brooke had inherited Mom's delicate features and blonde hair. I got Dad's sturdy build and mousy brown hair that frizzed in humidity. Brooke had married well, a man from a good family with a degree from a good school. I had a collection of failed relationships and a son whose father's name I didn't even put on the birth certificate. The comparisons were constant, woven into every conversation like poisoned thread through fabric. At family dinners, Mom would mention Brooke's latest accomplishment, her voice warm with pride, then turn to me and ask if I had finally gotten around to fixing that stain on my uniform shirt. At holidays, Dad would toast to Brooke and Mark's success, their bright future, their beautiful home, and I would sit there with Leo on my lap, feeling invisible. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that Leo and I had each other, and that was enough. I told myself a lot of lies in those days. The annual Maple Creek Summer Barbecue was supposed to be different this year. It was the town's biggest social event, held every August in backyards throughout the neighborhood on a rotating schedule. This year, it was my parents' turn to host, which meant weeks of preparation, thousands of dollars spent on decorations and catering, and endless discussions about the guest list and menu. Leo had been so excited when Mom mentioned that everyone was bringing a dish to share. He had begged me to let him help make something special, something that would make Grandma proud. We spent an entire evening after my shift planning it out. He wanted dinosaur cupcakes, his current obsession. We looked up recipes online at the library, spent 45 minutes in the baking aisle at the grocery store choosing the perfect sprinkles. We made them on Friday night, the day before the barbecue. Our tiny kitchen barely had counter space for the mixing bowl, but we made it work. Leo stood on a step stool, carefully measuring out flour and sugar, his little hands shaking with concentration. When he cracked the eggs, shell got in the batter, and we had to fish it out with a spoon, both of us giggling at the mess. The cupcakes came out perfect. Golden and fluffy, cooled on wire racks while we made the frosting. Leo insisted on blue frosting because it was more dinosaurish, and we tinted it until it was the exact shade of a robin's egg. He frosted each one with painstaking care, his tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully placed the plastic T-Rex figures on top. These weren't just cupcakes to him. They were his pride, his contribution to a family that barely acknowledged his existence. "Do you think Grandma will like them, Mom?" he asked, his eyes shining with hope. I should have said no. I should have prepared him for the inevitable disappointment. Instead, I kissed his forehead and lied. "She'll love them, sweetheart." When we arrived at the barbecue that Saturday afternoon, the backyard was already crowded with neighbors and my parents' friends. Someone had strung lights across the patio. The grill sent up plumes of fragrant smoke. A table near the house groaned under the weight of casseroles, salads, and desserts. Children ran through the sprinkler on the lawn, their shrieks of laughter piercing the summer air. Eleanor stood at the center of it all, holding court in her expensive white sundress, the one I knew cost more than I made in a month. Her hair was freshly colored and styled, her makeup flawless, her laugh tinkling across the lawn like crystal bells. She was surrounded by her friends from the Historical Society, women in their 50s and 60s who dressed like they were still in their 30s, who talked about their latest trips to Europe and their grandchildren's private school acceptances. She saw me approaching with Leo and the tray of cupcakes, and her smile faltered for just a moment before transforming into something sharp and cutting. I knew that look. I had seen it 1,000 times. It was the look that said I had already disappointed her simply by existing. Her voice carried across the yard, loud enough for everyone to hear. Good Lord, Clara. You could have at least worn something that didn't come from goodwill. You're embarrassing the entire family. Heat flooded my cheeks. I looked down at my outfit, a simple cotton dress I had gotten from the thrift store last month. It was clean, pressed, perfectly appropriate for a backyard barbecue. But that didn't matter. To my mother, anything I wore was automatically wrong, automatically shameful, automatically proof that I was dragging the family down. Several heads turned our way. I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door quickly look away, suddenly fascinated by the potato salad on her plate. Mr. Henderson coughed and took a long drink of his beer. The women in my mother's circle exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mixture of pity and judgment. Brooke, standing near Mom with a glass of wine, actually giggled and pulled out her phone to take a selfie, deliberately angling it so I would appear disheveled and frumpy in the background. She was wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget and a silk top that looked like it had never seen the inside of a washing machine. Her hair cascaded in perfect waves down her back. Her makeup was professionally done. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, and she knew it. Smile, Clara. She called out in a sing-song voice. You're going to be famous on my Instagram, #FamilyTime. I swallowed the humiliation like I always did, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. Leo tugged at my hand, sensing the tension but not understanding it. It's okay, Mom, he whispered, and my heart broke a little more. A 6-year-old should never have to comfort his mother like that. A 6-year-old should never have learned to navigate the treacherous waters of adult cruelty. We made our way to the dessert table, and I set the cupcakes down between a fancy layer cake and what looked like homemade fruit tarts. Leo's dinosaur cupcakes looked childish in comparison, the blue frosting a bit too bright, the plastic dinosaurs cheap and obvious. I saw them through my mother's eyes and felt a wave of preemptive shame. But Leo didn't see it that way. He was so proud when I set the tray down, bouncing on his toes with excitement. Can I show the other kids, Mom? Can I tell them we made them together? Of course, sweetheart, I said, smoothing down his hair. Go ahead. He immediately started inviting other kids to look at the cupcakes, his face glowing with innocent excitement. The Henderson boy came over, and Leo launched into an enthusiastic explanation of how we had made them, what each ingredient was, how hard it was to get the frosting the right color. I watched him from across the yard, my heart swelling with love and breaking with fear in equal measure. I should have stayed closer to him. I should have seen what was about to happen. I was talking to Sarah, my one real friend in this town, when I heard the commotion. Sarah worked at the diner with me, and she had only come to the barbecue because I had begged her to, knowing I would need an ally. We were discussing the new manager when I heard my mother's voice rise above the general chatter of the party. The Henderson kid had been startled by a bee, one of the fat yellow and black ones that always appeared when there was food outside. He had jerked backward, flailing his arms, and bumped into Leo. The cupcake in Leo's hand, the one he had been holding out to show another child, went flying, arcing through the air in what felt like slow motion. It landed directly on Eleanor's pristine white dress, leaving a smear of blue frosting and glitter across the fabric like a wound. The cupcake itself bounced off and hit the ground, the plastic dinosaur rolling sadly across the patio. The world stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children froze in their tracks. Even the music from the speakers seemed to fade into background static. Eleanor looked down at her dress, at the spreading blue stain, at the glitter that caught the sunlight like a million tiny accusations. Her face went through a transformation I had seen before, but never quite this extreme. Shock, disbelief, and then fury, pure and undiluted, burning in her eyes like hellfire. She didn't hesitate. She didn't pause to see it was an accident. She didn't even look at the Henderson boy who had actually caused the collision, who was standing there white-faced and trembling. She simply reached out and slapped Leo across the face with such force that the crack echoed across the suddenly silent yard like a gunshot. Leo's small body reeled from the impact. He stumbled sideways, his hand flying to his cheek, and I saw the red handprint already forming on his pale skin like a brand. But worse than the physical mark was his face, the confusion, the fear, the shame. He looked around at the dozens of adults watching, and I saw something die in his eyes, some innocent belief that the world was fundamentally safe. I was already running, already pushing through the crowd, but I felt like I was moving through water, everything slow and distorted. Eleanor grabbed the front of his shirt before I could reach him, yanking him closer with such force that his feet left the ground. Her face was inches from his, twisted with rage, and her voice was venomous, each word landing like a physical blow. "You worthless little brat! Do you see what you've done? Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? This is what happens when you don't know your place. Trash needs to be taught a lesson. Trash like you needs to learn that there are consequences for ruining other people's things." Leo's eyes found mine across the few feet that separated us, brimming with tears that threatened to spill over, and asked a question no child should ever have to ask. Had he made Grandma angry? Was this his fault? Should he apologize? Why wasn't I protecting him? I finally reached them and pulled Leo away from my mother's grip, tucking him behind me like a shield. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit her back. I wanted to defend my son with the same ferocity she had just used to attack him. But I was too trained, too conditioned to submit. The words stuck in my throat. That was when I saw my father. Richard had witnessed the entire thing. He stood near the grill with Tom Henderson, spatula in hand, sauce smeared on his apron. Our eyes met for one brief moment, and I waited for him to say something, to defend his grandson, to show even the smallest shred of decency. Instead, he turned to Eleanor and said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent yard, "Don't waste your energy on it, dear. It's not worth getting upset over. Come try these ribs I just finished. They're the best batch yet." Then he walked away, completely dismissing his own grandchild as if he were nothing more than a stray dog who had wandered into the wrong yard, as if the red handprint on Leo's face didn't exist. As if his wife hadn't just committed an act of violence in front of 70 witnesses. Brooke's laugh cut through the silence like a knife. She was recording on her phone now, because of course she was. "Oh my God, Mom's right to be tough. Kids these days are so spoiled. They need to learn respect. Sometimes you need a firm hand. Right, Mark?" Her husband, standing next to her with a beer in his hand, nodded uncomfortably. "I mean, yeah, discipline is important." I looked around at the neighbors, the people who had known Leo since he was born, who had watched him grow up, who had smiled at him and waved at him and told me what a sweet boy he was. They were all frozen, drinks halfway to their mouths, eyes carefully looking anywhere but at us. The Pattersons, the Johnsons, the Williamses, the Chens, the Rodriguezes. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them stepped forward. Not one of them told my mother that what she had done was wrong. Mrs. Patterson, who had given Leo a Christmas present last year, turned away and struck up a conversation with Mrs. Johnson about the weather. Mr. Williams walked over to the cooler for another beer, his movements deliberate and loud as if to cover the awkward silence. The Chens gathered their 2 children and moved toward the other side of the yard. They simply turned away, one by one, resuming their conversations in hushed, uncomfortable tones. Someone turned the music up louder. Someone else suggested they should start the 3-legged race for the kids. Within 60 seconds, the party had resumed as if nothing had happened, as if a grown woman hadn't just struck a 6-year-old child in front of everyone. Their silence was somehow more damning than my mother's cruelty. It told Leo that what had happened was acceptable, that adults could hurt children and face no consequences, that speaking up was less important than keeping the peace. Eleanor smoothed down her dress, the blue stain still visible, and turned to her friends. "I'm so sorry about that disruption, ladies. You know how it is with children who aren't properly supervised. Shall we continue our discussion about the fall gala?" I gathered Leo into my arms. He was trying so hard not to cry in front of everyone, his small body rigid with the effort of holding it in. I could feel him shaking. We walked through the crowd, and people parted for us like we were carrying something contagious. No one met my eyes. No one asked if Leo was okay. Sarah followed us, her face pale with shock. "Clara, that was—" "Don't," I said, my voice barely audible. "Not here." We walked home in silence, even though home was just upstairs in the same building. Leo's hand was small and hot in mine. The red mark on his cheek was swelling slightly. I could see his reflection in the window of a parked car as we passed, and the image seared itself into my memory. My small son, his face marked with his grandmother's handprint, his eyes downcast, his shoulders hunched. That night, I held him, as he cried himself to sleep, the red mark on his cheek, a brand that seared itself into my memory, into my soul, into every cell of my body. He asked me 3 times if it was his fault. He asked me if Grandma hated him. He asked me why Grandpa didn't stop her. He asked me why none of the other adults helped him. I had no answers that wouldn't destroy him further, so I held him and sang to him and lied to him, telling him that everything would be okay, that people sometimes made mistakes, that Grandma was just upset about her dress. But inside, in a place I didn't know existed until that moment, something was changing, hardening, crystallizing into something sharp and cold and utterly unbreakable. In the darkness of our attic room, with Leo's soft breathing beside me and the sounds of the continuing party drifting up from below, something inside me crystallized. I could hear laughter. I could hear my mother's voice, back to its usual charming tone, entertaining her guests. I could hear Brooke's distinctive giggle. The party went on. The world kept turning. And no one cared that my son had been assaulted. I had spent 25 years being the acceptable target for my family's cruelty. I had absorbed their insults, their financial manipulation, their emotional abuse. I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was worth the cost to my dignity and self-worth. I had told myself that this was just how families were, that I was too sensitive, that I should be grateful for the roof over my head even if it came with a side of constant humiliation. But Leo didn't deserve this. He was innocent. He was pure and sweet and full of love, despite everything he had witnessed and endured. And in that moment, staring at the red mark on his face, I realized that I didn't deserve it either. I had never deserved it. The thought was revolutionary, shocking. It reorganized my entire understanding of my life. For 25 years, I had operated under the assumption that I was fundamentally flawed, that my mother's cruelty was somehow my fault, that if I could just be better, prettier, more successful, and more like Brooke, then I would earn their love. But that was a lie. It had always been a lie. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. Around 2 a.m, I pulled out an old journal from the back of my closet, one I had kept sporadically over the years. I had documented incidents I had tried to forget, moments that had felt too painful to process but too significant to completely erase from memory. I read through it with new eyes, seeing patterns I had missed before. The time I was hospitalized at 15 with appendicitis, and my mother had been more worried about missing her bridge game than about my surgery. The Christmas when I was 17 and didn't receive a single present because, as Dad explained, they had put that money toward Brooke's spring break trip instead. The time I made the honor roll in high school, and my mother said, "Well, at least you're not completely useless." There were dozens of entries, hundreds of small cruelties that had accumulated over the years like sediment, building up layer by layer until I was buried under the weight of them. But the entries about Leo were worse. The time Eleanor refused to take him to the hospital when he had bronchitis, saying, "If he's that weak, natural selection will take care of it. I'm not wasting my Saturday in an emergency room for a cough." I had eventually taken him myself, using my credit card for the copay I couldn't afford. And the doctor had been horrified at how bad it had gotten. Leo had needed breathing treatments and antibiotics, another day or two, and he might have needed to be admitted. The time Brooke had posted a photo on Facebook of Leo wearing my old too big clothes with the caption, "Poverty chic" and laughing face emojis. I had asked her to take it down, and she had responded by blocking me. The time my father had told Leo, to his face, that he wished his mother had been smart enough not to have him, that Leo was the reason I was stuck in a dead-end life. Leo had been 4 years old. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through text messages I had never deleted, conversations I had saved as if some part of me knew I would need evidence someday. Brooke had sent dozens over the years, each one a small dagger aimed at my self-worth. "Did you seriously wear that to Thanksgiving? You looked like a homeless person. Maybe if you spent less on junk food and more on decent clothes, people would take you seriously." Leo asked me why he doesn't have a daddy like other kids. I told him it's because his mom makes bad choices. "You're welcome for the honesty." "Mom showed me your bank statement. How are you even alive on that income?" "Oh right, because we support you." "You're welcome." I took screenshots of all of them, organizing them carefully in a folder. Then I went through my email, finding the letter from my father that I had saved from 5 years ago. I had asked for help with community college tuition, just $3,000 spread over 2 semesters. I wanted to get my associate's degree, maybe work toward becoming a librarian or a teacher, something with benefits and a future. His response had been cold and final. "Clara, I'm going to be frank with you. Investing in your education at this point would be throwing money away. You've demonstrated consistently that you make poor decisions. I'm not willing to fund another one of your failures. You have free housing. That's more than generous. If you want to improve your situation, I suggest you work harder." I had cried for 3 days after receiving that email. Then I had deleted it from my inbox, unable to bear seeing it every time I logged in. But I had forgotten about the trash folder, and there it was, preserved like a fossil of my father's contempt. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be twisted or explained away. I needed them to condemn themselves in their own words. So I went back to my parents' house the next day, a Sunday, leaving Leah with Sarah. I told her I needed a few hours, and she agreed immediately, her eyes full of sympathy and unspoken rage at what she had witnessed. Leo didn't want me to go, clinging to my leg, and I had to peel his fingers away gently, promising I would be back soon. I brought a peace offering a bottle of wine from the expensive section at the liquor store, the kind my mother liked, the kind that cost half my daily tip earnings. I brought a practiced apology, the words rehearsed in my head until they sounded natural, and I brought my phone, set to record audio, tucked in the front pocket of my cardigan. Eleanor was in the kitchen, arranging flowers from her garden in a crystal vase. The breakfast dishes were still on the counter, which meant my father was probably in his study. Brooke's car wasn't in the driveway. Perfect. She barely looked up when I entered. What do you want? I set the wine on the counter, my hands trembling slightly. Mom, I wanted to apologize for yesterday, for ruining your party, for Leo's behavior. She set down the vase with a sharp clink that made me flinch. Sorry doesn't fix my dress, Clara. Do you have any idea how much that cost? It was Italian linen. I'll have to have it professionally cleaned, if it can even be saved. But that's typical of you, isn't it? Destroying things without thinking about the consequences. I forced my voice to stay level, submissive, the way she expected. I know, I'm sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning, and I'll make sure Leo understands better. Understands what? That he should exist quietly and not make his presence known? She turned to face me fully now, her eyes cold. Clara, you need to teach that boy where he stands in this family. He made me look like a fool in front of the entire neighborhood. Do you know what people must be thinking? That I can't control my own household, that I'm being disrespected by a 6-year-old bastard child. The word hit me like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly what I needed. Keep going, I thought. Keep talking. I'll talk to him, I said quietly. I'll explain. You need to do more than talk. You need to discipline him properly. I barely touched him yesterday, and he acted like I had beaten him. He's too soft. You're raising him to be weak, just like you. She picked up the wine bottle, examining the label with a critical eye. At least you have some taste, even if you can't afford it. This is acceptable. The kitchen door opened, and Brooke walked in, carrying shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford to walk into. Oh, look who's here. The apologetic peasant. She set her bags on the counter and pulled out her phone. Are you recording this, Clara? Because it would make a great Instagram story. How to apologize when your kid ruins everything. I'm not recording anything, I lied smoothly. I just came to apologize. Brooke rolled her eyes and turned to our mother. Mom, you were totally right yesterday. Kids these days are so spoiled. They need to learn respect. Clara babies Leo too much. That's why he's so clingy and weird. He's not weird, I said, unable to stop myself. He's 6 years old. He's 6 years old and still doesn't know how to behave in public. Eleanor interjected. That's on you, Clara. You're his mother. You're responsible for his behavior. And clearly, you're doing a terrible job. I'm doing my best, I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. Your best isn't good enough, my mother said flatly. It's never been good enough. Look at yourself. 2 jobs and you still can't afford your own place. You're still dependent on us for housing, for food, for everything. And you have the audacity to complain when I try to correct your child's behavior. Brooke laughed, a sharp sound without humor. Come on, Clara. You're being too sensitive. It was just a slap. He needs to toughen up. You baby him too much. That's why he's going to grow up to be a loser like his mom. My hands clenched into fists in my pockets, but I forced them to relax. I understand. I'll work on it. You need to do more than work on it, Eleanor said, opening the wine and pouring herself a glass without offering me any. You need to teach him that actions have consequences. He ruined my dress, ruined my party, embarrassed me in front of my friends, and for what? Because he's clumsy and careless and doesn't think before he acts, just like you when you got pregnant. There it was, the real issue, always circling back to my original sin, the mistake that had defined my entire adult life. I was young, I said quietly. I made a mistake. You made a choice, my father said from the doorway. I hadn't heard him come down the hall. A stupid, selfish choice that you're still paying for. And now you're making us pay for it too. Housing you, feeding you, dealing with that boy's behavior. We've sacrificed enough for you, Clara. It's time you started showing some gratitude. 4 against 1. The recording was picking up everything, every word, every tone, every casual cruelty. I am grateful, I said, the words like ash in my mouth. I know you've done a lot for me. Have we? My father asked, walking over to pour himself some of the wine I had brought. Because from where I'm standing, we've enabled you. We've allowed you to avoid taking real responsibility for your life. Maybe it's time we stopped. Maybe it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. Was this it? Were they going to kick me out? Part of me wanted them to, wanted the decision to be made for me. But I thought of Leo, and I stayed silent. Richard, don't be hasty, Eleanor said, but there was a calculating look in her eyes. Clara is trying. She brought wine. She's apologizing. She understands that she needs to do better. Don't you, Clara? Yes, I said. I understand. Good. She took a sip of wine, her expression softening slightly. Then perhaps we can move past yesterday's unpleasantness. I'm hosting a charity tea party next Saturday. It's very important. The mayor will be there, along with several members of the town council and the board of the Historical Society. I expect you to help. This was my penance, I realized. My punishment for existing, for having a child who had accidentally stained her dress. Of course, I said. What do you need me to do? You'll make the desserts, she said, not asked. Something elegant. Nothing with plastic toys or excessive glitter. Something that shows you have some class for once. Consider it your chance to make amends. Do this right, and maybe we can forget about yesterday. Do it wrong, and, well, we'll have to reconsider our arrangement. The threat was clear. Perform or lose your housing. Perform or be cast out with a 6-year-old child and no savings. Brooke smirked. Better not mess this up, Clara. Mom's giving you a chance to prove you're not completely useless. Try not to embarrass us again. I nodded, keeping my expression meek and grateful. I'll make something beautiful. I promise. See that you do, my father said, turning to leave, and keep that boy out of sight during the party. I don't want any more incidents. I stayed for another 20 minutes, letting them talk about the party, the guest list, the menu. I asked questions. I took notes. I played the role of the dutiful, chastened daughter. All the while, my phone recorded everything. When I finally left and walked back to Sarah's apartment to pick up Leo, I felt different. Lighter, somehow, despite the weight of what I was carrying. I had everything I needed now. Their own words, their own admissions, their own cruelty captured and preserved. I spent the next 4 days planning, not desserts. Not elegant tea sandwiches or petite fours. I was planning something else entirely, something that had been taking shape in my mind since the moment my mother's hand connected with my son's face. I wasn't making amends. I was making a reckoning. I called in sick to both my shifts on Tuesday, something I had never done before. I told my manager I had the flu, and he sighed but didn't argue, my perfect attendance record buying me some grace. Then I got to work. I went to the craft store and bought small gift boxes, the fancy kind with magnetic closures. I bought ribbon in silver and white. I bought cardstock and a package of USB drives on sale. I spent 3 hours at the library using their printer, carefully formatting and printing documents. Photos, text messages, email excerpts. Each box was personalized, crafted with care. Eleanor's box contained the photo of Leo in the hospital with bronchitis, the one I had taken on my phone while sitting by his bedside. His tiny hand was pierced with an IV, his face pale and drawn. Next to it, I printed out her quote from the recording. If he's that weak, natural selection will take care of it. Below that, I added the hospital bill, the one I had put on my credit card, the one that had taken me 8 months to pay off. Richard's box held a copy of that rejection letter about college tuition, his handwritten note about wasting money printed large and clear. I added a timeline of every financial contribution they had made to Brooke over the past 5 years, totaling nearly $70,000, next to the zero they had contributed to me and Leo. Brooke's box was filled with printed screenshots of her text messages to me over the years. Every cruel joke about my weight, my job, my thrift store clothes, my failed relationships, my bastard child. I tied them together with a pink ribbon and included a note. A sampling of Sisterly Love, 2019 to 2024. For the neighbors, I created cards with different quotes I had collected over the years, things my family had said about me when they thought I wasn't listening, or didn't care if I was. Each card was elegant, looking like an inspirational quote, until you read the words. We chose Brooke because she's prettier. You were just a mistake. Clara? She's just a sack of depression and bad choices. That boy is the reason our family can't have nice things. We should have encouraged her to give him up for adoption. Too late now. The final touch was the USB drives. I copied the audio recording onto each one, along with a folder containing photos, documents, and a detailed timeline of abuse spanning back to my childhood. I attached small charms to each drive to make them look decorative, like party favors. Anyone who took one home would have access to everything. On Friday night, I assembled it all in our tiny apartment while Leo slept. The boxes looked beautiful, like expensive gifts from a high-end boutique. No one would know what they contained until it was too late. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather, clear blue skies, a gentle breeze, temperatures in the mid-70s. The kind of day that Okay, Mom. Sarah stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She nodded slowly. Then go do what you need to do. We'll be here when you get back. I drove to my parents' house with the boxes carefully arranged in the trunk. The house gleamed in the morning sunlight, freshly painted and perfectly landscaped. Cars were already lining the street. Caterers moved in and out with trays and equipment. Eleanor stood on the front porch in a designer dress, directing traffic like a general commanding troops. She saw me pull up and frowned. I was early. Too early to be helpful, but late enough to be noticed. I parked and carried the first load of boxes to the side entrance, the one that led directly to the kitchen. The catering staff barely glanced at me as I made multiple trips, assuming I was part of the hired help. Perfect. The dining room had been transformed. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, china cups and saucers arranged with mathematical precision. The dessert table stood near the window, already groaning under the weight of professionally made pastries, tiny cakes, delicate cookies arranged in towers. I set my boxes among them, making them look like intentional party favors. They blended in perfectly with the elegant aesthetic. No one would question them until it was too late. Eleanor found me in the kitchen as I was arranging the last box. "Clara, you're early." "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect," I said, keeping my voice mild. She looked at the boxes on the table, visible through the doorway. "What are those?" "Gift boxes. I thought it would be nice to give each guest something to take home. A party favor, something personal." Her expression softened slightly. "That's actually thoughtful. What's in them?" "It's a surprise," I said, and I wasn't lying. She studied me for a moment, suspicious but unable to pinpoint why. "Well, at least you're making an effort. Make yourself useful and help the caterers set up the tea service." I spent the next hour doing exactly that, playing the role of the obedient daughter. I arranged cups, I folded napkins. I smiled at my mother's friends as they arrived, all of them air-kissing Eleanor and complimenting her dress, her home, her exquisite taste. The mayor arrived at noon, followed by members of the town council. The president of the Historical Society came with her husband, Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Johnson arrived together, both of them avoiding eye contact with me. The Williamses, the Hendersons, though I noticed they looked uncomfortable. Nearly 70 people in total, filling the house with the sound of polite conversation and clinking china. Brooke arrived fashionably late, of course, making an entrance in a dress that probably cost more than my car. She barely acknowledged me, too busy posing for photos with our mother and her friends. I stayed in the background, refilling tea, clearing plates, being invisible. That was my role in this family, after all. The servant daughter, the one who existed to make everyone else's lives easier. At 1:30, Eleanor stood up to make her speech. The room quieted immediately, all eyes turning to her. She was a natural performer, comfortable with attention, skilled at saying exactly what people wanted to hear. "Thank you all so much for coming today," she began, her voice warm and gracious. "As many of you know, this year's charity gala is particularly important to me. We're raising funds for the Children's Wing at Mercy Hospital, a cause that's close to my heart. Family is everything, and children are our future. We must protect them, nurture them, show them what it means to be part of a loving community." The irony was so thick I could taste it. I stood near the kitchen doorway, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful family," she continued, gesturing to where Brooke stood near the window, and even toward me, though her gesture was vague, dismissive. "My daughters have taught me so much about love and sacrifice, about the importance of values and standards, about maintaining dignity in the face of challenges." People nodded, smiling. They ate it up, this carefully constructed image of Eleanor Hartwell as the perfect mother, the pillar of the community, the woman who had everything figured out. And so, before we discuss the details of the upcoming gala, I want to thank you all for being part of our extended family. Each of you makes Maple Creek the special place it is. And as a token of my appreciation, my daughter Clara has prepared small gifts for each of you. Please, help yourselves to the boxes on the dessert table. Think of them as a reminder of the bonds we share as a community. This was it, the moment I had been building toward. People moved toward the dessert table, drawn by curiosity and the promise of an elegant. His face went pale as he looked at the contents. "Eleanor, this is a photo of a child in the hospital, with a quote from you about natural selection." Eleanor's face drained of color. She snatched the box from his hands, staring at the contents. I watched as recognition dawned, as she realized what I had done. This is taken out of context. This is ridiculous." But people were still opening boxes. Brooke's scream cut through the growing murmur of confusion. She was holding the stack of her text messages, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. "Clara, what the hell is this?" Richard pushed through the crowd, grabbing one of the boxes. He opened it and went rigid, staring at his own words from that email, at the evidence of the vast financial disparity between his two daughters. The whispers were growing louder now. People comparing what they had received, putting the pieces together, the full picture of my family's cruelty emerging like a photograph in a dark room. "There must be some mistake," Eleanor said, her voice rising with panic. She tried to laugh, but it came out wrong, brittle and false. "Clara, what is this? Some kind of joke?" I stepped forward, out of the shadows, into the center of the room. Every eye turned to me. "It's not a joke, Mom. It's the truth." The room was so silent I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, could hear someone's teacup rattling in its saucer. Richard's face was turning red, rage replacing shock. "You need to explain yourself right now. What are you trying to do? Ruin us?" "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I'm just showing people who you really are." "You ungrateful little," Eleanor started, but I cut her off. "Last Saturday, at the barbecue, You slapped my 6-year-old son across the face in front of 70 witnesses because he accidentally got frosting on your dress. An accident. A child's accident. And not one person in this room said anything. Not one person told you it was wrong. Mrs. Patterson looked down at her hands. Others shifted uncomfortably. But that wasn't the worst part, I continued. The worst part was what you said afterward. What you called him. The worst part was Dad walking away like Leo wasn't even human. The worst part was everyone going back to their potato salad and pretending it never happened. That's enough, Richard said, his voice dangerous. You need to leave. Now. I'm not finished. I pulled out my phone, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I went back the next day. I apologized to you, Mom. Do you remember? I brought you wine. I told you I was sorry. Eleanor's eyes widened as she realized what was coming. And you told me exactly what you thought of me and my son. Would you like everyone to hear it? Don't you dare, she hissed. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speaker on the side table, the one she had set up for background music. My finger hovered over the play button. Clara, please, Brooke said, and for the first time in my life, I heard fear in her voice. Think about what you're doing. Think about the family. I have thought about it, I said. I've thought about nothing else for days, and I realized something. You're not my family. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't hit children. Family doesn't mock and humiliate and manipulate. I pressed play. The recording filled the room, crystal clear and damning. My mother's voice talking about Leo needing to know his place, calling him a bastard child, saying she barely touched him. Brooke, laughing about him being soft and weird. My father threatening to kick us out. All of it, laid bare for everyone to hear. The audio played for 2 minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, the silence was absolute. Then someone started crying. I looked over and saw Mrs. Henderson, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. That little boy, she whispered. That sweet little boy. And we did nothing. The mayor set down his teacup with deliberate care. Eleanor, Richard, I think it's time I left. Wait, Eleanor said desperately. You don't understand. She's manipulating you. She's always been difficult, always causing problems. She got pregnant out of wedlock. She's been dependent on us for years. I heard what I heard, the mayor said coldly, and I saw what I saw last Saturday. I should have said something then. I regret that I didn't. He walked out. Others followed. Mrs. Patterson stopped in front of me, her eyes red. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. I was a coward. One by one, the guests left. Some took the USB drives from the table. Some didn't, but all of them left with the knowledge of what my family really was beneath the perfect exterior. Within 15 minutes, the house was empty except for my parents, Brooke, and me. Eleanor stood in the wreckage of her party, her makeup starting to smear from the tears she was trying to hold back. You've destroyed us. Do you understand that? You've destroyed everything we built. No, I said quietly. I just showed people what was already there. You destroyed yourselves. Richard took a step toward me, and I saw Brooke move to block him, which surprised me. Dad, don't. This is bad enough already. Get out, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Get your things and get out of my house. You have until tomorrow morning. Already done, I said. I moved our stuff out yesterday while you were at the office. We're staying with a friend. The lie came easily. I had actually paid for a cheap motel room for the week, using the last of my savings, but they didn't need to know that. Eleanor's voice was venomous. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't survive on your own, and we won't be here for you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. I've been surviving on my own this whole time, Mom. You just never noticed because you were too busy comparing me to Brooke and finding me lacking. But I'm done trying to earn your love. I'm done accepting crumbs and calling it family. I walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and one more thing. That recording? It's backed up in multiple places. And I've already sent copies to a family therapist who's willing to testify about the pattern of abuse if I need it, so I'd think very carefully before you try to retaliate. Brooke's face went even paler. You wouldn't. Try me. I left through the front door, walking down the steps and across the perfect lawn to my car. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. But I also felt free. The aftermath was swift and brutal, though not for me. Someone from the party posted about the incident on the Maple Creek Neighbors Facebook group that evening, not including the audio but describing what had happened. By Sunday morning, someone else had shared the recording. By Monday, it had been shared to 3 other local groups and had racked up over 10,000 listens. The comments were vicious. People who had smiled at my parents for years were now calling them out. Former friends demanded accountability. Someone started a petition to remove my father from the town council. The charity organization Eleanor chaired sent a formal letter asking her to step down, citing concerns about her judgment and character. The Historical Society did the same. Her name was quietly removed from the gala committee. Richard lost 2 major clients within the week. One left a review online mentioning that they couldn't in good conscience work with someone who treated family members so cruelly. The other simply stopped returning his calls. Brooke's social media accounts went dark after she was tagged in dozens of posts about the incident. Her friends, it turned out, were only friends when she was on top. The moment she became a social pariah, they vanished. The HOA sent multiple letters about the disturbance, the complaints from neighbors, the impact on property values. People who had smiled and waved at my parents for 30 years now crossed the street to avoid them. My phone rang constantly for the first few days. My mother calling to scream at me. My father calling to threaten legal action. Brooke calling to beg me to issue a public apology, to say I had made it all up, to save the family's reputation. I blocked all their numbers. Sarah helped me find a small apartment in the next town over, a place called Riverside that was 40 minutes from Maple Creek. It was smaller than even the attic room had been, but it was clean and safe and, most importantly, it was ours. The landlord didn't run a background check beyond verifying my employment, which was a miracle. The first night in our new apartment, Leo helped me unpack our few belongings. He kept asking if we were really not going back to Grandma's house, his voice tentative, like he was afraid to hope. We're really not going back. I told him firmly, this is our home now, just you and me. He threw his arms around me and held on tight. I like it here, Mom. It's quiet. That word struck me. Quiet. He was right. There was no undercurrent of tension, no waiting for the next criticism, no walking on eggshells. It was just quiet. I found a job at the Riverside Public Library 3 weeks later. It was part-time to start, just 25 hours a week, but the director said there was potential for full-time in a few months. The pay was slightly better than the diner, and the hours were more predictable. Better yet, my coworkers were kind. They asked about my day and meant it. They complimented the lunch I brought and didn't follow it up with a subtle insult. On my first day, the director, a woman named Patricia, who was in her 60s with kind eyes, showed me around and then said something that made me want to cry. We're glad to have you here, Clara. You seem like someone who's been through a lot. I hope this place can be a refuge for you. I didn't know how she knew, but I was grateful she did. Leo started first grade at Riverside Elementary. Without the constant stress of his grandmother's house, without the weight of being called worthless and unwanted, he began to transform. He made friends easily. His teacher sent home notes about how bright he was, how helpful, how kind to the other children. He joined the after-school art club and came home with paintings that we hung on every available wall in our tiny apartment. At his first parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Kim smiled at me and said, "Leo is a joy to have in class. You're doing a wonderful job with him." I actually cried. Right there in the elementary school classroom, I cried. Because it was the first time anyone had ever told me I was doing a good job as a mother. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Reeves. The first session, I could barely speak. I sat in her office, surrounded by soft lighting and comfortable furniture, and felt like an imposter. Like I didn't deserve help, didn't deserve to take up space, didn't deserve to heal. She let me sit in silence for 10 minutes before she spoke. "Clara, I want you to know that what you experienced wasn't normal family conflict. It was systematic abuse. And abuse doesn't leave bruises just on the body, it leaves them on the soul." Over the following months, she helped me understand things I had never been able to articulate. The way my mother had used shame as a weapon, the way my father's financial control had kept me trapped, the way Brooke had been weaponized against me, turned into a constant reminder of my inadequacy. The way the entire family system had been designed to keep me small, powerless, grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. She taught me about boundaries, real boundaries, not just the concept but the practice. How to recognize when someone was trying to manipulate me, how to say no without feeling guilty, how to recognize my own worth independent of anyone else's opinion. It was hard work, harder than anything I had ever done. There were days when I wanted to quit, when the old patterns felt safer than the new ones, when I questioned whether I had done the right thing. But then I would look at Leo, laughing with his new friends, or concentrating on his homework, or sleeping peacefully without nightmares, and I knew I had saved us both. My parents tried to contact me twice more after the initial flood of angry calls. The first time was about 6 weeks after I left. My father showed up at the corner booth diner during my last shift there, before I started at the library. I was clearing tables when I looked up and saw him standing at the entrance, scanning the room. Our eyes met. I saw him start toward me, his face set in that expression I knew so well, the one that meant he was about to deliver an ultimatum. I walked straight to the manager's office and told him my father was harassing me and I needed him removed from the premises. The manager, a burly guy named Tom who had always been decent to me, went out and had a quiet word with my father. Whatever he said, it worked. Dad left without causing a scene. The second time was worse. 3 months after I left, my mother showed up at Leo's school. She told the front office she was his grandmother and she had permission to pick him up early for a doctor's appointment. Thank God I had already filled out the paperwork listing exactly who was and wasn't allowed to take Leo from school. Mrs. Kim called me immediately, and I left work to find my mother in the principal's office, arguing that she had grandparental rights, that I was keeping her from her grandson, that this was all a misunderstanding. The principal, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Shaw, listened to Eleanor's performance and then turned to me. Miss Thompson, do you want this woman to have access to your son? Absolutely not, I said firmly. She physically assaulted him. I have photos of the bruising and witnesses. Eleanor's face went white, then red. That's a lie! I never! There's a recording, I said quietly, of you admitting to it and dismissing it as nothing. Dr. Shaw stood up. Mrs. Hartwell, you need to leave now. If you attempt to contact or pick up Leo again, we will contact the police. Do you understand? Eleanor left, but not before turning to me with such hatred in her eyes that I actually took a step back. You'll regret this, she hissed. You're going to fail, and when you do, don't come crying to us. But I didn't fail. We didn't fail. Brooke sent a text message about 4 months after I left. I saw it come through because I hadn't blocked her on my new number yet. You've ruined everything. Mom and Dad are getting divorced. Dad's business is failing. Mom's been ostracized from all her social. The cupcakes tasted sweet. The freedom tasted sweeter.